All right, friends, welcome. Thank you for coming. Welcome those of you in the room, and we know that a lot of people watch by YouTube later on, so welcome to you guys. And doing this not every other Wednesday, but some Wednesdays. I've been out of town for a couple weeks, and I just like to talk about Bible and things, so thank you for humoring me and listening. It's more fun to tell people than to talk to myself. And I thought it'd be nice this time of year. I've tried to do this other years during December, and December just unravels for everybody. So I thought before Advent begins, we do a little look at sort of what the Bible has to say about Advent, look at some art and some music and some archaeology and things like that I just think are interesting, and hopefully you will as well. So, so calling it Prepare Him Room to prepare us for Advent and Christmas, which is great. So thank you for coming. The Christmas story, if you don't know this, actually only occurs in two of the Gospels. John's Gospel kind of alludes to it theologically when it says the Word became flesh, but it's not really a birth narrative. It's what we typically hear, and what we see in our manger scenes really comes from Matthew and Luke. Mark does not mention this at all, and Matthew and Luke are pretty much mutually exclusive from each other. They have the same characters, but they don't do the same things. Matthew begins with the genealogy. The angel speaks to Joseph, and Luke, the angel speaks to Mary. Luke gives us Elizabeth and Zechariah. Matthew's got the Magi, the wise men. Luke has Mary visiting with Elizabeth and the shepherds and Simeon and Anna. Matthew has the flight into Egypt and the slaughter of the innocents. It's really something. So look at that. Matthew begins with the genealogy. You might think, well, that's just the dumbest way to begin a book if you're going to hold people's attention. But genealogies are actually pretty interesting, and this biblical one in particular, these aren't just random people who happen to be up in the family tree. All of these are people that are mentioned in the course of the Old Testament, many of them with stories of, a lot of them are embarrassing stories. Just because you are in Jesus' family tree doesn't make you a saint. Actually, that seems to be part of the point, is that Jesus' family tree isn't a bunch of squeaky clean saints. It's a bunch of people that have made all kinds of mistakes. And just right at the outset, Jesus is from the house of David. We'd covered David in here a few weeks back. Mothers, you don't want your daughters to grow up and marry David. He's just, what a scoundrel, what a difficult guy. God manages somehow to use him anyway. So Jesus' family tree, and it gets depicted all over the place. This is the so-called Jesse tree window in the Cathedral of Chartres. There are a lot of these, though, all over Europe and some churches in America. So it shows a tree and the relationship, and you go further up, and you get, there's Jesus, and then right below Jesus, there's Mary. And I thought it'd be fun to do some music. You know, Mary, by the way, is the fifth woman mentioned in the genealogy. If we had more time, I'd say if you can name all five, you get an A+ for the semester. Anybody want to try that? There's usually like some ex-Southern Baptist in the crowd, and they can just do it. So you have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. And all of those women, like, what is Matthew up to? He only mentions 4 women and then Mary. And all those women have like this, make you blush story, right? That involves rape or seduction or something. So it's kind of easy to say, Matthew's trying to say this gospel is for everybody. Well, there's also a little bit of a gender issue there. If you're only naming women that have troubled past, it's also trying to redeem Mary, right, who winds up with child. I've never been with a man. That's interesting. There's music in all of this. I wanted to listen to something. Here's a hymn that you know that actually alludes to Jesus' genealogy. It's such a lovely hymn. casting Mary as a rose, but from a stem, from Jesse's lineage. All those names, by the way, if you just think about it, just naming Jesse, right? If you know your Old Testament, you immediately run to that story where Samuel comes to anoint the new king of Israel, and Jesse trots out his tall, brawny sons, and none of them are the right one. It turns out it's little David out in the field. All the stories are evoked by each name in the genealogy. So that's a big deal. Luke, it kind of has a make you shiver beginning. I've said several times lately in sermons and in another class that a lot of people are anxious now in one form or another. It's a bipartisan thing. People are anxious about their government here in America, and they feel like, oh, we have terrible rulers, we have terrible leaders. Some people think they're great, but it's because we've had other terrible leaders. Whatever it is you think about that, and I've said several times that Christianity was born. Jesus was born, Christianity was born and thrived in a culture not where half the people loathed their government, but where 98% of the people just trembled in fear and were intimidated by and just hated those in governing authority. Isn't that interesting? So Luke just begins, right out of the chute, in the days of King Herod. We tend to think he's like a character in the manger scene. But you say in the days of King Herod, this is a megalomaniac who murdered members of his own family, right? Just terribly cruel, built all the wonders of the world, what should have been wonders of the world on the backs of overtaxing peasants. Luke takes the story that we associate with Bethlehem or with Nazareth, but for Luke it really begins in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem temple. It's almost as if Luke is trying to say all that stuff that God's temple has been about through history, this is about to come to fulfillment. We don't associate the Jerusalem temple with that. That actually is the case. Zechariah is a priest there, and he goes in, and he happens to be alone offering incense. You can read the whole story in Luke chapter 1. I hope you will. I send out, by the way, bi-weekly emails, and I have a couple coming that are reflecting on the story of Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. He comes in, the angel appears to him, tells him his wife's going to have a baby. This seems really unlikely because she's really old. And this story, of course, evokes a memory of whom? I did this years ago, and a man shouted out his wife's name. Dude, not wise. Abraham and Sarah, right, who unexpected, they have a child miraculously, seeming, so it's like, is God about to do this again? It's sort of setting a tone. Zechariah is so overcome by this that he is struck mute. He comes out. He has to gesture to the people, and they gesture to him. So it turns out you infer he's not only mute, but he's also deaf. He can't hear. Then they have the whole issue of the name, right? So the angel says his name will be John. It's not a name that his family has ever used. And so when they come out, Elizabeth says, oh, the child will be named John. People say, that's not a name that's ever been used in your family. And it's sort of a miracle that the two of them arrive at this strange name independently, which is super interesting. That's the inside of the temple. So then Luke takes us up to Nazareth. Nazareth today is a busy, bustling city, thousands and thousands of residents and terrible traffic. You can barely navigate your way around the city. But in Bible times, the population of Nazareth, they don't know, but they think it was maybe 100, 200 people tops. So, I mean, a little small village. Joseph and Mary wind up betrothed. I mean, how many eligible people could there be in a town like Nazareth, right? So this isn't high romance and a big dating game back in that world. And Mary lives there. She's young. What does Mary look like? I love this is Sassaferato. It's kind of my favorite artistic representation of Mary, although there's a lot that's wrong with this image, right? But call out a couple things that are just obviously wrong with it. She's really white. She looks like she has never been out of doors in her life, and she's got a really good dermatologist, right? I mean, I think in ancient times, I picture Mary with more of a weathered look. Years ago, I visited in the home of an Episcopal priest who had this portrait hanging over his fireplace, and it's not especially intended to be Mary. It's just a woman with a child. But that resonates more with me of the Mary that I envision. Like, there's some toughness there. She's got some weathering. She's been out in the world. Luke 1:26, of course, tells the story that in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel, angels in the Bible, by the way, angels in our world, they're little, like little white figurines. They're all kind of, real feminine. They help you find your car keys and that kind of thing. In the Bible world, angels are generally male. They're big. They are intimidating. They are warriors, right? And so if an angel appeared, that would scare the daylights out of you. I love what Martin Luther wrote. This is kind of cool. Gabriel was like the greatest warrior in the angelic host. So Luther says this about God sending Gabriel. Gabriel did not resent being used as an errand boy to carry word to a lowly maiden. His glory was laid aside. He appeared to her simply in the guise of a comely youth. I love that. Gabriel was used to being called on to win mighty victories for God, but he's humble enough to accept this assignment just to be an errand boy to deliver a message. I love that. That's Luther. You've all heard me tell the Elie Wiesel thing. You can probably quote it with me. Elie Wiesel said, if an angel ever appears and says, do not be afraid, you better watch out because a big assignment is on the way. This is always the case. The little angels on TV, they do cute things for you. But in the Bible, generally the angels show up at really momentous times, and there are huge tasks that the angels inform us about, which is really interesting. Mary's call, what did it look like? We don't know what it called. This is a painting that I love by Henry Ossawa Tanner. This is a painting by Gailey Korjeff that almost landed in our church. We have the two paintings that are above the stairwell in the Parish Life building. Van Weatherspoon purchased those and donated them to us, and he was close on, I love this, this image of Mary being spoken to by the angel. The great medieval fresco artist Giotto did this in the Scrivani Chapel in Padua. If you look at this, there's actually an arch in the room that is the entrance and the exit. So Mary is on the right and the angel is on the left. It's as if Giotto took the space and created what would be the space, right, between us and the heavenly world. Like there's a space there. There's a distance that's being bridged because of the angel coming. Mary's there hearing from... There's a call pattern in the Bible. Some of you heard me tell this before, but bear with me. When God calls people in the Bible, there's the way this story always unfolds. God comes to Moses and says, Moses, I want you to deliver the people of Israel. And what does Moses say? He says, I can't do that. I can't speak. God comes to Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, I'm too young. Isaiah says, woe is me. I'm a man of unclean lips. I'm not holy enough. Jeremiah is too young. God comes to Jonah to go preach to the Assyrians. I think his excuse is they're not worthy of this. God comes to Mary, and of course she has a reason, which is, I've never been with a man. And God always counters these. God doesn't say, do you have a sufficient resume for you to be able to respond to my calling? God just wants availability. And Mary is available. What does she say? She says, let it be to me according to your word, implying she had choice, that she could have said no. And the let it be to me according to your word. I love that through medieval art, Mary is almost always pictured carrying a Bible. She's got a little Bible here with Giotto. This is a Poussin painting. So the angel comes and Mary has an open book. And Mary most likely was illiterate. Most people in that day were illiterate, especially lived in a small little village like Nazareth. People didn't own books. That's like a modern thing. You got a bookshelf. Back then, people didn't own books. But in Nazareth, there would have been a book. There would have been a book, a Bible, what we think of as the Old Testament in the synagogue. So Mary is someone, like so many ancient Jews, she would have known Bible, but not from reading it or carrying it. She would have known Bible from hearing it from her parents, from hearing it in the synagogue. She, probably like all Jewish mothers, taught Bible to her son Jesus. I said this to a group one time, and somebody got really offended, he was Jesus, he knew the Bible. Okay, that's fine. But what the gospel is about is that God becomes human like us. So I have no doubt that Jesus fell and scraped his knee, and he cried, and he got fevers, and he probably didn't always do what his mother wanted him to do. We know that actually from the Bible. And he had to learn Bible, and he does from his mother, and it's really poignant, isn't it? That, for instance, Jesus would have learned the Psalms from memory, as most Jews did in that day, from his mother, right? And so then his mother later is at the foot of the cross, and when Jesus is dying, he doesn't make up a prayer. He quotes a couple of Psalms. My God, why have you forsaken me? Mary taught him those words when he was little, and she hears them coming off his lips. So powerful. I hadn't thought too much about Mary until I went to the home of that Episcopal priest named Herbert O'Driscoll. He was alive a couple of months ago. He's like 99 or something. We exchanged emails. It was great to get in touch with him again. I went to his home, and shortly after I got to visit his home, he published a book about Mary. And there was a quote in there that has just changed my thinking about Mary. Here's how it goes. Mary felt the divine visitation, which in some way comes to us all. What had been asked of her was unique, to be the mother of the Son of God, and yet an echo of it reaches all of us if only we have the ears to hear. She had been asked to offer herself to the divine will, to become a servant. She made her choice, as we all must. Fully and freely, she said yes. And for those who say yes, nothing is ever the same again. He's picking up on an idea from another medieval theologian named Meister Eckhart, who, I love this. We are all meant to be mothers of God. What good is it if this eternal birth of the divine Son takes place in Mary, but not within me? What good is it if Mary is full of grace, but I am not also full of grace? What good is it for the Creator to give birth to a son if I do not also give birth to him in my time and culture? This then is the fullness of time when the Son of God is begotten in us. I love that idea. When the angel comes to Mary there in Luke 1:26, she responds by saying, I've never been with a child. This is picking up on the idea that comes from Isaiah. This is Michelangelo's Isaiah in the Sistine Chapel, which is really fabulous. I love the little cherub's curly hair. It's pretty amazing. Of course, in Isaiah 7, you have the moment where King Ahaz is trying to figure out whether to go into battle or how to go into battle, and the prophet Isaiah is with him. And Isaiah says, ask God for a sign. And Ahab, he's kind of smug and pious. He's a tough leader. I'll take care of this. He said, no, I wouldn't tempt God by asking for a sign. And Isaiah says, well, there is a sign. A woman shall conceive and bear a son, and his name will be called Emmanuel. It got translated in the Greek as a virgin shall give birth to a child, and his name will be called Emmanuel. So people thought, well, that's a prediction of Jesus long in advance. Ahab, in that moment, Ahaz, I said Ahab, always comes out wrong. Ahaz, in that moment, needs help. The people of Israel need help. And so what Isaiah says is that this child will be born. We're going to call him Emmanuel. It's a nickname that means God's with us. God is with us in this political crisis right now. That says something about the nature of God. So therefore it is, in a way, fulfilled in the coming of Jesus. We'll say more about that in a little bit, but it's not Isaiah making a prophecy of that. A little more from the hymn that we heard a minute ago. love that line. I didn't ponder it for years. Well, two things. One is why we could ask, why is it that Christmas has evoked so much? It's evoked like the worst kitsch and corny and dumb stuff, right? So we have to allow that. But we can also say, though, that the Christmas story has elicited so much beauty, right? I mean, we decorate our homes with beauty, but there's so much music, so much art. We could ask why that's the case. And then I love that line where we stopped in Lo, how a rose ere blooming, which is to show God's love aright. It sort of implies that we could show God's love a wrong. I made up that word. We see God's love a wrong often, but the whole point of this is to show God's love aright. What is God's love like? It's somehow, we'll say more about this, it's somehow like the birth of a vulnerable baby in the middle of nowhere. I like to think a lot about Joseph. We don't know much about Joseph. Matthew's gospel seems especially preoccupied with Joseph. The angel comes to Joseph in Matthew. Matthew 1:19 says that Joseph was virtuous. It doesn't really expand upon that. What does that mean that he's virtuous? I would add this. Joseph clearly is merciful. He has good cause. I mean, you're in the little town, you're engaged to a woman, and she's pregnant, and she's saying it's an angel. I mean, you look like a fool, and you know people are snickering and whispering. He had good cause to put her away, to shame her, but instead he doesn't. He stays with her. So he is a person of mercy. Then I wrote a book years ago about that has a chapter on Joseph, and I got to thinking about Joseph and all the Christmas pageants. You know, one year when I was a kid, there was a Christmas pageant at school, and I auditioned for the part of Joseph, and I did not get it. And this is really embarrassing because Joseph has no lines, right? What does Joseph do? He's just there, kind of looking at Mary and Joseph holding the reins of the donkey. So I thought about that part, though, and maybe actually there's some ideal in that for us. Joseph is just near Jesus. Joseph is just watching Jesus. Joseph, he's just holding the reins of the donkey. Right? Sometimes we think we want to do something spectacular for God, or God's going to do something spectacular for us. But maybe it's something in Joseph. He's a person of virtue, a person of mercy. But then he's also somebody, he just is there. He's constant. He's near. He's watchful. There's not a lot of attention in the Bible to the days of Mary's pregnancy except her visit to Elizabeth, which we'll talk about in a moment. I love the way that Amy Grant, Amy Grant's pretty good. Like you have sort of, the old canon of beloved Christmas music, Away in a Manger and Silent Night and all those things. But then you occasionally get the new song that makes it into the canon, like Feliz Navidad. That's fun. Those kinds of things. Amy Grant's got two in there, right? But the one I really love is this breath of heaven. And I especially love these words that are worth pondering.
Breath of heaven, hold me together, be forever near me. Breath of heaven, breath of heaven, lighten my darkness, pour over me your holiness, for you are holy. Breath of heaven. Do you wonder as you watch my face if a wiser one should have had my place? But I offer all I am for the mercy of your plan. Help
I love that. A song daring to explore how would Mary have felt. We don't know these things, and sometimes we misread a culture because it's a totally different culture 2,000 years ago on the other side of the globe, and yet the humility in it, should a wiser one take my place? I'm frightened by the load I bear. We forget that childbirth in the ancient world was an exceedingly risky phenomenon for child, but then also for mother. They didn't have antibiotics, right? They didn't know how to do C-sections well and so on. So death in childbirth was very common. In that family tree, you have the story of Rachel, Jacob's wife, who dies in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin, and many other examples. That's just lovely, her asking for God's help. The one thing that we know that she does during that time, she makes a journey. And she would have gone on foot. We always picture, this is actually interesting, always in pageants and such, they show people in Bible times riding on donkeys. What we know is people rarely rode on donkeys. If you've ever ridden on a donkey, you may understand this. Right? Go to Israel and they give you a donkey ride, and like 30 seconds is about enough. And so the idea of a whole day journey on a donkey, they use the donkeys to carry the stuff, right, to carry the luggage, and you pretty much walked. So I mapped it on Google. It's kind of fun that you can do this. So how long does it take to walk from Nazareth to Ein Kerem, sort of a suburb of Jerusalem, like Matthews is a suburb of Charlotte? How long does it take Mary to walk from Nazareth to Ein Kerem? And Google says you can walk that in 34 hours. Kind of interesting. I don't know how long it took her. She goes on a journey, pregnant, because she's learned that her kinswoman Elizabeth is also pregnant. So she's amazed by her own pregnancy. The word that Elizabeth is pregnant would be stunning and moving. And the two of them need to be together. Read recently Richard Rohr, who always has something wise to say about everything. She says that Mary, by doing this, became history's first missionary. She was the first person to take Christ out into the world. I love that. Mary makes her way to Ein Kerem. I've taken groups to Ein Kerem. I don't know if any of you got there with me. There's a complex of churches there. It's a really beautiful place. There's the statue that I love there of Mary and Elizabeth. The story in Luke, of course, is that Mary comes in the room bearing the Christ child. Elizabeth is bearing John, the child that would be John the Baptist, in her womb. And when Jesus comes into the room in utero, John the Baptist gives an especially hard kick to his mom, he's the one. It's fascinating stuff. I have a friend named Jeremy Troxler, who's a pastor here in North Carolina. Jeremy wrote a beautiful article a few years back for a book that I was editing. And in it, he talks about Elizabeth being a mentor to Mary. I had never thought of this. And what does a mentor do? So a bad mentor would give you a whole lot of advice about what you better do, right? But what do good mentors do? Good mentors listen. They share the journey. They bring out the best in you. They needed this time together. I'm so moved just by this moment. They come together. Mary, of course, sings while they're together, beginning Luke 1:46. Choirs make it fancy, give it a Latin title, Magnificat. Mary sings a song when she is with Elizabeth. And it begins, "My soul magnifies the Lord." I just keep thinking about that over and over. What would it mean for Mary to magnify the Lord? What would it mean? It's not that the Lord's small and needs to be magnified, but then maybe my life could be something that people could look through. And as they look through me, they would see the largeness, the wonder of the Lord. That's one of those things you ponder. Luke tells us that Mary, what? Kept all these things and pondered The word ponder is interesting, right? The Latin word pondus means weight, something that's heavy. You carry something that's heavy. It's not superficial. It's not light that you can just toss around. It's something heavy, and you hold it and you bear it. And when it says that she kept these things in her heart, the Greek verb translated kept is symbalusa, which really means tossed around. A friend of mine said it's like what the dryer does with your clothing, right? Like it tosses it around. Mary tosses it all around. She carries that weight. I love that. I had a special privilege years ago. I got to take the young, newly ordained female clergy of our annual conference to Israel, and we made it there to Ein Kerem, and they were really moved by that experience. It's kind of a place that's devoted to women. Women came together there. Women shared something amazing there. If you don't recognize, the second from the right on the lower level is the greatest woman clergy person ever, which is our daughter, Sarah. Anyway, it was a great privilege to take that group there. It was really meaningful for them, and I love being there with them. So we leave Ein Kerem. Mary goes back to Nazareth, and then she and Joseph find their way to Bethlehem. This is a lithograph that was created by an artist named David Roberts in the early 1800s of what Bethlehem looked like then. This Bethlehem in the early 1800s is probably not real different from the Bethlehem of Bible times. It's changed so much now, super commercialized place. But in those days, it would have looked something like this. It's a hilly place, a little small village. And Luke begins that story at the beginning of chapter 2. In the same way, he began chapter 1 by saying, in the days of King Herod the Great. I'm like, oh, you tremble. He begins chapter 2 by saying, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. I think there are two words in there that should give you the shivers, right? So one is Caesar Augustus. This is the greatest of all the Roman emperors, and he bragged about the peace that he brought to the world. You probably learned this in school, the Pax Romana, right? It was not peace. It's not peace if it's won at the edge of a sword. It's not peace if it's enforced by regiments ready to break your knees if you get out of line. But that was Caesar Augustus's peace. Also, I think just that word decree, it's an English word, but the Greek underlying it is similar. A decree went out. It sounds intimidating, doesn't it? It sounds like power from above that's oppressive. A decree went out. You must obey. It's in such a day that Jesus comes. I've talked about this before, and I've written on it a few times, and I can't prove this, but I still think it's cool, is that if you look at Roman history, I love Roman history, if Jesus had shown up, if Jesus had shown up 70 years later, there was a little period of time where the Roman emperors were real weaklings, Galba and Vitellius. I mean, they were just total nincompoops, and they had no power, and they couldn't keep the empire in order. Nobody was scared of them. Jesus should have snuck in then, right? It's like a sign of weakness. That's when it'll come. No, Jesus comes during the reign of Caesar Augustus, the greatest. It's like there's a message in that. Like, this is true power. This is the true way, not what appears to be the powerful way. It's kin, I think. Can't prove this either. When did the Israelites escape Egypt? Who was the Pharaoh at the time? We don't know for sure, but most theories would say it is Ramses II, called Ramses the Great, the longest reigning and perhaps the most powerful of all the Egyptian pharaohs. Again, the Israelites should have snuck out when they had a weakling on the throne, but nope. It was during the greatest, there's something in that. Not entirely sure what it is. Mary and Joseph make their way to Bethlehem, and you probably don't know this yet, but in a week or two, we have a new painting that's being donated to our church that's going to be installed. It's big. On the second floor, at the top of the stairwell in the Parish Life building. So if you go up the stairs and you would turn left to go to Jubilee Hall, if you turn right where you're headed toward the bathrooms and my office, in that direction on that wall there's a painting, and it depicts three scenes together. One is the shepherds, one is the arrival of the Magi, and then there's also in the center, Mary and Joseph arriving. She's great with child, and the innkeeper is saying, sorry. Right? It's really cool. I love what the great Frederick Buechner wrote about this. He wrote a whole sermon on this that's lovely. But let me just summarize it. He pictures that innkeeper looking back years later on that fateful night. He talks about how hard it is to run an inn. There are a million little things to attend to. And he wasn't lying. There really was no room in his inn. And how he wasn't there when the baby was born. This is the end of the sermon. The innkeeper speaking. But this I do know. All your life long, you wait for your own true love to come. We all of us do. Our destiny, our joy, our heart's desire. When he came, I missed him. Pray for me. I love that. The whole sermon's, well, you can look it up, you can Google it. It's all really powerful. Mary goes into labor, and again, stuff you should think about, but you just don't think about. What was Mary's labor like? St. Augustine, he was foolish. St. Augustine had such a reverential view of Jesus and Mary that he wrote this in several sermons, that when Mary was in labor, she had no pain at all. So Jesus became human, like maybe Mary had pain in childbirth. He should have asked his mother Monica about that, right? Before he wrote all of that. Years ago, I read a beautiful book by this author named Rachel Marie Stone. I didn't know her. I've gotten to know her a little bit since then. And she wrote a whole essay on Mary being in labor. And let me just read this to you. This is one of the most profound things I've ever read. So much thought went into this, and this is the kind of thing, once you hear it, you go, oh yeah. So, a girl was in labor with God. She groaned and sweated and arched her back, crying out for deliverance, and finally delivering God. God's head pressing on her cervix, emerging from her vagina, perhaps tearing her flesh a little. God, the Son, her Son, covered in vernix and blood. The infant God's first breath, the close air of crowded quarters. God the Son, her Son, pressed to her breast. God the Son, her Son, drinking deeply from his mother. Drink, my beloved. This is my body, broken for you. I can't get over that, right? Mary saying, this is my body broken for you. Then years later, Jesus speaks of his own flesh about to be broken. This is my body broken for you. Just lovely, that first cry. Madeline Lingle said that that first cry is really something, right? I could say when you had a child, Greg and I hadn't had that experience, right? And some people haven't that experience, but every one of us at some point, we were that experience for someone. You were born, and the really kind of clincher moment, right, is when that first cry, I don't know what it is, it's like an announcement, I'm here, to the world. Madeline Lingle said that Jesus' first cry sounded like the ringing of a bell. I love that. They laid Jesus in a manger. If you go to Israel with me, but you can find these in other countries as well. Mangers are all over the place, archaeologically dating back to the time of Jesus, time of Solomon. They're everywhere. They're just feeding troughs. Animals would come and they would feed from these troughs. It's the French word, manger, right? Betsy's nodding. She's good at French. It's a feeding trough. It's so cool. Like, it would make a good manger, but Jesus is put in a feeding trough. And it evokes all kinds of images, because who do we think of Jesus being later? Jesus is what? He's the bread of life, right? So many images come out of that. I love artistic images of the birth of Jesus. This is, again, Giotto at that Scrovegni chapel. I love this intense look of Mary. Jesus, it's like old grown-up already, all wrapped up in those swaddling clothes. I love the Rembrandt, the adoration of the shepherds. And Jesus, he's almost like a little lantern there, glowing, giving light to the people that are looking on. I've written several times on this, so if you've heard me talk about this, it just is always what I like to reflect on. How shall I say it? That there's kind of this magical circle that every one of us, you were in that magical circle at some time when you were a newborn. I don't care how it turned out later, like with your mother, if you had a tense relationship, if she died it doesn't matter. When you were first born, there's this kind of tender moment, and there's this holy, tender, beautiful, peaceful circle of just the mother curled around her child. I like to think about that, like everybody else can only look on. Like when our children were born, I could look on, but I couldn't be in that circle. And I like to say that when you were in that circle, you were, that was maybe the greatest moment in your life. You were the most beloved at that moment that you would ever be. You were the most like God in that moment that you would ever be. You were as pure as you would ever be in that moment. And that's the point of the gospel, is that God wanted us to know God's heart. God didn't want to intimidate us. God didn't want to enforce laws. God wanted us to love God and love ourselves and love others. So God said, I want them to know me. I'll do that, right? That most beautiful, tender, peaceful, glorious, holy thing. And Rembrandt captures this. It's the kind of thing you just get. One medieval theologian said that when Jesus was born, the whole earth was silent for an hour. Then he added, even dogs did not bark. I love that. We do a lot of quiet stuff around Advent. We do a lot of stuff around darkness and light. I love this thing that we do, of course, on Christmas Eve. And what we sing, it's not totally quiet, but it's pretty quiet. We sing what? Silent Night. Some of the Christmas carols have words about silence and peace and quiet. We have this beautiful moment that we all treasure. If you travel, boy, you're really missing it, the way we do Christmas Eve. That whole business of silent, I love the music of Christmas. I love most of it. Grandma got run over by a reindeer, I don't know. We do by the way, soon every year we do a UMAR Christmas party, which is my personal highlight of the year, just ahead of Christmas Eve services. So our UMAR residents, these are physically and mentally challenged adults who have an arts program in our building. We started this years ago. They come to our church for a Christmas party, and we have pizza, and they watch a couple of movies, and then we get around the piano, and I have thank God my mother made me take piano. I hated it at the time, but then because she did that, I can lead the UMAR residents in singing Christmas carols. And they just sing the daylights out of these things, and it's great fun. But then I take requests, and the first request is always, do you know Grandma got run over by a reindeer? And we sing it. It's just a thing. But it kind of violates, the peace, the solitude. And so I think about that beautiful moment, and the light and the darkness is just evocative of so much. And then about the time Lisa and I were dating, this Mannheim steamroller business came out redoing some Christmas carols. And I was just so moved, and I continue to be. I thought I'd play just a little bit of this for you. What a gift, these musicians coming up with the stuff for us. And you don't need them to sing the words. You know the words. You know them by heart. And it's not by heart, just you remember them. They're by heart. They're in your heart. They're the things that really move you. So lovely. And The Magi come. This is Rembrandt, the Visitation of the Magi. So much about, I love this mosaic, by the way, 5th century mosaic in Ravenna in the north of Italy. I love it, like they're in motion coming with their gifts. I love there's an Italian movie out of the 60s by a guy named Pasolini. It's got English subtitles, but it's just my favorite Jesus movie ever. And I love that the Magi show up. They show up by day. Like, you think, it's daytime. They travel by day and night. And they show up by day in the movie. And then I just love one of the Magi. He just takes the child, and I should have showed the video, just holds him like a grandfather would. It's just so beautiful. We don't know how many Magi there were, by the way. We assume 3, but that's why. They had 3 gifts. Medieval art sometimes portrays 6 Magi, 7 Magi, 10, 12. Who knows? A bunch of Magi came. Astrologers from the East. And there's always humor in this. It's a little bawdy humor. The movie The Life of Brian, Monty Python, they're following the star as best they can, and not surprisingly, it's a star up in the sky. They show up at the wrong house. And Brian's mother, she can't believe these people are showing up in the middle of the night, strangers. Like, what are you doing here? So she's trying to get them out of the house. And one of them says, we brought gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And she says, well, why didn't you say so? Come on in. It's a bawdy moment. And if you like the novel A Prayer for Owen Meany, it's a pretty good moment. They're sitting during the Christmas pageant, and they're singing We Three Kings. And they get to the stand that goes sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying. And Owen leans over and says, that doesn't sound very Christmassy to me. Which is great. Luke continues with the story of Jesus is born, but on the 8th day they take him to the temple to be circumcised. And so interesting. There are 2 old people there, Simeon and Anna. And the imagery of those 2, Simeon actually says it. He says, now let your servant depart in peace. It's not just Israel's been waiting everywhere. The whole world has been waiting for the coming of this child. And the child has now come, and Simeon, I can go now. This is enough. This is what we've been waiting for. This is the meaning of it all. I love that he says that. He also says the thing to his mother. He says, this child is set for the fall and the rise of many in Israel. We usually, in the world history, we think of the rise and the fall, right? The rise and fall of the Third Reich. But Simeon says it's the fall and the rise. But that's how it will be for Jesus, right? He will fall in death and the crucifixion and then be raised. He also says to Mary, his mother, a sword will pierce your heart. It's sort of like the first message from somebody to Mary. This adventure will be so painful for you. That's certainly fulfilled in the cross. Then I hadn't thought of this for a long time. Again, I always advocate reading the Bible slowly and thinking about it. There's stuff, I've done this so many times. I've read it in Greek. I've taught it 100 times, and I keep learning new things. I was writing a book about this last year, and I read someone who pointed out that Mary hands her child to the priest, and what does the priest do with the child in circumcision? He draws blood, right? And the child screams in pain. So this is the first time Mary has to give up her child for the shedding of blood, the pain. It's kind of her first separation. It's the first time she hands him to someone else. Eventually he'll be handed over to evil men. Speaking of evil men, of course, Herod, paranoid as ever, learns that, the Magi say, we come to worship the King of the Jews. I'm the King of the Jews. They totally diss him, right? And he plans to kill them and the baby. They escape by another way. So to get rid of the child, in typical Herod fashion, he has all the young boys slaughtered. It's not like peace comes in the wake of Jesus' arrival. I love it in I do Lord of the Rings too much, but I just love it. So if you know this, so you have the eye of Sauron. It's sort of this location of evil. It's this eye evil that looks around the world. And every time the hobbits do something good, that eye sort of recoils, right? Because evil wants to win. Jesus is born as sort of the first recoil of evil that will have its way. Herod's the first, and we'll kill some children. It's just brutal. In the wake of Jesus' arrival, this happens. It's a cruel world that Jesus comes to save. This is the Giotto painting at the Scrovegni Chapel again, which is just fabulous. I love the way in fresco in the Middle Ages he captures just the grief and agony and terror these parents' faces. There's more. I had a couple things I wanted to share, but I think I'll leave those for another day. That's kind of the story of the birth of Jesus. It goes on. We're beginning to read, by the way, through the Gospel of Luke. Our bishop put out sort of a challenge. Can all of us in our conference read the book of Luke and then Acts, which is sort of volume 2 of Luke, together in the course of the next year? So we're going to follow along with that. We've begun. If you get those bi-weekly emails that I send out, I have started Luke. If you missed them, you can catch up. Luke's great. And we'll track that and read it slowly, because when you read slowly, you just learn more, you get more, you ponder. It's weighty. You can toss it around in your soul. So we'll be doing that over the next year, and this is a place to start here before the new year, because Jesus' advent and all is really the beginning of the story. So that's kind of what I have. Thank you. Questions or anything while we're here together? About her labor? Yeah. Rachel Marie Stone. She wrote a book called, it has birthing in the title. It's a really lovely book. I think it's called Birthing Hope, but that might be wrong. But I can tell you later, Andy, if you ask me about that. What else? I could answer that one. That was easy. I did in this room on Sunday night, confirmation every year. They do confirmation Q&A with James, right? And so they submit questions in a fishbowl. Oh my gosh. So they ask dumb stuff like, why do you like Duke? Or whatever. When was your first kiss? This year, this was a great question. One of the questions, so Sarah Simmons is reading it to me. So she pulls this one out. She says, do you think cussing is a sin? And then it added, do you ever cuss even when you're alone at home and no one knows? It's like this background of these questions, right? Anyway, but that was just lovely. But they ask hard questions about who goes to heaven and what about my Jewish friends? And so they're super thoughtful, and a mob of them. Good grief, we have so many confirmands to give us hope for the life of the church. I'm rambling. Other question. What? Yeah. Jack.
I know this sounds heretical, but
we don't tolerate heresy in this room.
Was Jesus sent as a person by God rather than Jesus came as God?
Yes, is the answer to that. Yeah. So what the church has taught and has come to make more and more sense to me over time is that God came in the person of Jesus. He's a person. He gets sad, he cries, he dies, he bleeds, he gets hungry. He's disappointed in his friends. He breaks his mother's heart, but yet he loves his mother. I mean, he's very much a person. But what we believe is that somehow through that person, we see God with utter clarity, right? And another way to think of it is Jesus says all the stuff in the Gospel of John. Here's the way I like to think about it. Jesus says, the Father and I are one. Well, it doesn't mean they're one. I think what he means is, I don't know about you, Jack. I experience, even at my holiest and noblest, there is distance between me and God. I try to close that distance, but it's not on God's side, it's on my side. There's distance. I try to be as God-like as I can, but there's just distance. I don't pull that off. I think with Jesus, there just wasn't distance. He was so close to God. He wasn't consumed by himself and all these other issues that you and I get plagued by. He was just one with God. So he says, if you have seen me, you have seen God the Father. right? So what we see in Jesus is all the stuff that it's true about God, but we missed it because we thought God was something else. We thought God was, mighty God ruling. But Jesus shows us God, and that God is vulnerable. He bleeds, he loves, he's tender, he touches the untouchable. He blesses the nobodies. He calls the smug pious on the carpet for missing out on that, right? So all that is who God is. Jesus doesn't just talk about God, he actually shows us God. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great prayer. You can't prove this to someone who doesn't buy such a thing. Although I've done a lot of this in my lifetime where thinking about confirmation for years and years, Temple Israel has the equivalent of what we would call a confirmation class. And they actually call it confirmation, but it's a little bit different because it's in Judaism anyway. So they have a class of teenagers. They're like 9th and 10th graders. And they come here, and we sit in the sanctuary, and we talk about Christianity. And then they ask questions. So I try to talk about what Christianity is, and they ask questions. And it's wonderful. Because you have kids, they're raised on something that's just very different, and they don't understand just some simple things that you and I just assume. And they actually, it's interesting. I'm going to talk too long. After this, I'll stop. It's interesting. They come, and their parents come with them. And you know how their parents come with them? They don't come because they want to hear me talk. They come because many Jews are a little skittish to walk into a church because they've been mistreated, they've been hounded. Anti-Semitism is a real thing for kids in schools. And then even stupid stuff happens. In Davidson, I did a program with Rabbi at the time, Jim Bennett, way back, and we did this program together in my sanctuary up in Davidson. We've got a crowd there. It's going great. We're having a blast. And so then it ends, we say, are there questions? And a woman in the back says, why don't you believe in the virgin birth? I turned around. I didn't know her, and I said out loud to Jim, I said, I don't know her. Just rude and obnoxious, right? And then there are these people. So the last time I spoke at Temple Bethel, Rabbi Schindler and I did a program, and there were these guys sitting down front. They looked very suspicious to me, kind of like these women down front today. And I'm a little on edge. So Judy says, are there questions? Their hands shoot up. And they're these Messianic Jews, right? Whatever they are. And they light into me saying, why aren't you trying to convert her and these Jews in this room? So they're accustomed to terrible treatment. And of course, the answer to that question, why aren't you trying to convert these Jews? There are many answers to that question, but one of them is in the lifetime of a couple of people who were in that room that night, there was a Holocaust that they barely survived and got out of Poland and landed here in Charlotte. Yeah, you do want to be part of the religion of those people, those priests who stood up and they heiled Hitler and were part of the whole Holocaust project. Oh yeah, that's the religion you want to be part of. Are you kidding me? Anyway, so stuff happens. I don't know why I got onto that. Question. I'll take one more question if we can. Danny.
It appeared like that on your email, that this was going to be not a two-part thing, but you would repeat it later.
So for a while, I was doing at 11 o'clock and repeating it at 7 o'clock at night. The 7 o'clock crowd was kind of thin, and I don't know, we just decided to put it on video because for most of these things, this is a good crowd. I'll put it on video, and hundreds of people all over the place will watch it. I'm grateful for you. I love having people in person. Like, this is fabulous. But we also get a lot of people that watch it, and people in other states and even other countries can watch it if we do that. So that's right now our strategy. So I'm really grateful y'all came. Heartening to see faces. We get to lay hands on each other. It's great. So thank you all. I don't know.